Ladies and gentlemen, we all know him, we all love him. With a show of applause, let's welcome Stan the Man, ladies. So we were just asking,
how long do we have to stay here?
What time does your flight leave?
Wait a minute, I heard there were a couple people here who didn't see the Avengers. If you have time, you could go see them now. We'll still be here.
Hey, by a show of hands or noise, who saw the Avengers twice?
You want to ask them what our trick was?
I don't know, what was the trick?
I just told you about it 5 minutes ago backstage. All right, forget it, I'll tell them.
You know how you say you can't hear that great? I don't listen that well.
Nobody listens to me, I'm used to it. Now, here's the story. But this is just between us. Do I see an empty seat back there? I'm leaving. All the seats aren't filled.
Yeah, I don't know, it's like quantum. I think that part is quantum.
Anyway, here's what we do. You may wonder why my cameos are so brief. There's a reason. You see, some people go to see a movie that I have a cameo in, and they miss it because they blink their eye or something. Then the movie has ended, and they say, wait a minute, we missed Stan's cameo. So they've got to buy another ticket and go back. Now you know the secret why the Avengers did so much business. My cameo was so brief, they missed it. But that's only between us. I don't want other people to learn this great secret. Okay, can I go now?
No, not yet. Not yet. Not yet. What we like to do is, of course, have you guys ask Stan questions because we know you have a lot.
Why does it always have to be asking me questions? Why am I always on the hot seat? Can't we just have a nice conversation?
You want to just have a conversation?
Should we just talk like people do? You know, how have you been? How's the family?
How was your lunch today?
I beg your pardon?
How was your lunch today?
I haven't seen her. I'm 2,000 miles away. What a question. How would I know?
Okay.
I can see why we ask questions.
Yeah, take questions from the audience.
We're not good talking to each other.
No, when we talk to each other in the back, you don't want to hear that. It's not nice. No, we have I think we have a microphone set up. Is that what you guys are there? So, each side. So we're going to go right and left, or left and my right, or whatever. I'm going to ask you to speak loudly because where we're sitting, we can hardly hear anything. So I'm going to repeat the question sometimes to Stan, just so you know, okay? So let's start with the first one.
Hello, Mr. Lee. I just wanted to ask, what gave you the idea of creating the Avengers?
Well, I had all these characters, and I figured I ought to do something with them. And I can't remember it that clearly, but I had been writing the Hulk, and I was writing Iron Man and all the others, and you know, unlike our competition, I won't mention their name, all of our characters sort of lived in the same place. I mean, and they lived in New York. They didn't live in Gotham City, Metropolis. I wanted to visit Metropolis once. There ain't no such place. They lived in New York, and I figured, well, if they all live there, they'll run into each other sooner or later, and I wrote little stories where in the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man appeared and so forth. And then I guess one day I must have figured, why not bring a lot of them together? Oh, I think also, no, Colonel Fury came later. It's hard to remember the order of these things. The greatest thing is that S.H.I.E.L.D. is part of it now. I love S.H.I.E.L.D. Does anybody know what SHIELD stands for? S-H-I-E-L-D.
Tell us.
Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement Logistic Division.
What do you say? Yeah. Well, the reason I asked, I couldn't hear it clearly, but I think they changed it from what I had it. When I created SHIELD, it stood for, let's see, I can remember, Supreme Headquarters International Law Enforcement Division. And I think they probably got a better thing now. I had to make mine up very quickly because we had a fast deadline. But anyway, I figured we'd get these guys all together and let them go fight people. So that's how the Avengers was born. Now don't you go around telling, if you're interviewed by any reporters, don't make it sound that simple. Oh, Stan figured he'd let them go fight people, and that was it. I mean, when you talk to the press, you say things like, Stan spent hours and days and weeks thinking about it.
Okay, good. Okay, so Mr. Lee, no doubt that Spider-Man is your best, because technically none of us would really be here unless you made that Spider by Parker in Amazing Fantasy. But if you had to choose, other than Spider-Man, who would be your favorite Marvel character in general?
Now here's another thing I never understand about questions. The question apparently is, other than Spider-Man, who's your favorite Marvel character? But he was talking for about 2 minutes before he said that. So what was he saying before that?
That's what he said, honestly. Exactly what he said. The other words were just like frosting on a cake. It was all.
It was leading up to it, actually.
Yes, right.
See, another thing, I have absolutely no idea where the voices come from. I'm looking there. The guy might have been over there, I don't know.
That's a good quote right there.
So what was the question?
My favorite Marvel character other than Spider-Man.
Well, who told you Spider-Man was?
Well, I would just figure, because, you know.
Well, that's okay. No, you're not on the hot seat. It's all right. I really love them all. In fact, when I was writing them, whichever one I was writing them at the moment, that was my favorite. Because I used to act them all out, you know. When I wrote Thor, I would say, "So be it." You know, and I try to talk like a Norse god would talk, because I'm very familiar with how Norse gods talk. And when I was writing Doctor Strange, I'd say things like, "By the hoary oaths of Hogarth, what's happening?" And I got into it. So I loved all the characters. I loved talking like the Thing, too. "Oh, damn Yancey gangs, I'd kill them." And I never talked like the Invisible Girl. I left that to other people. The question was, no, I don't really have any favorite character. If I was smart, I would just pick the one that sells the best and say that's my favorite. And then you'd all say he's pretty clever.
Thank you. That's a good answer. All right, next one up here.
What encouraged you to make Spider-Man?
Greed. If I was smart, I'd leave it alone and go to the next question, because that was a good reception. But I'll just add a little bit more, and you'll be wishing I had left it alone. What happened was, I had already written the Fantastic Four, and I don't remember the order of them, maybe the Hulk and the X-Men. And I needed something else, because I had a greedy publisher. He felt we were on a roll, and he said, "Come on, give me some more characters." So I came to him one day and I said, "I've got this idea. I think it's great. It's a guy called Spider-Man, and he's a teenager, and he has a lot of problems, personal problems." So my publisher, his name was Martin. Martin looked at me like I was from another planet. He said, "Stan, are Are you kidding? That is the worst title I ever heard. People hate spiders. You can't call a book Spider-Man. And you say you want him to be a teenager? Teenagers can only be sidekicks. And then he said, and you want him to have problems? Stan, don't you know what a superhero is? So as you may be gathering now from the hints I've thrown, he didn't like the idea. So a few months later, we were publishing a magazine that wasn't selling, and we decided to drop it, and we were going to put the last issue out. When you put out the last issue of a magazine, nobody cares what you put in it, because it's the last issue. It's not going to sell anyway. So just to get it out of my system, I put Spider-Man in the last issue of, what was the name of it? Amazing Fantasy, yeah. And it sold like crazy. So when the sales figures came in, Martin called me into his office, and I swear this is what he said. Hey Stan, you remember that idea of yours about Spider-Man that we liked so much? Why don't we do a series? And that's how Spidey was born.
Okay, bring up this side.
Mr. Lee, my question may not be as extravagant as all the others, but what does Excelsior mean?
Well, you know, you're probably going to say, I wish they'd stop asking them questions, because every question ends up with a long speech. But Excelsior requires a long speech. Am I using this mic okay? It sounds like the sound is coming and going to me. Anyway.
You guys can hear it in the back, right?
I heard one guy say, unfortunately. I had used little expressions. I used to write a column called Stan's Soapbox, and I had something called Bullpen Bulletins, and I also would write little notes and captions of the stories, and I tried to add, I love expressions. So sometimes I would end by saying, "'Nuff said," or I'd say, "hang loose," or "face front," or anything I thought of. Little by little, I noticed that the competition was starting to use those phrases also. I didn't like that. So I thought if I could only find something that I could say that they wouldn't use, because A, they wouldn't know what it meant, and B, they wouldn't know how to spell it. They weren't very bright. So I realized that on the Great Seal of the state of New York, it says Excelsior. Now I know there are some of you sitting there saying to themselves, to yourselves, what was Stan doing looking at the Great Seal of the state of New York? And I don't remember how I happened to see it. But somehow or other I did see it. And I looked up the word Excelsior. Now if you look in the dictionary, the first thing it says is, it's that stuff you put in packages so a fragile object won't get broken when you mail it. It looks like sand, it's crumbly stuff. And I figured, well, that isn't a good expression. But then there's a second definition, and you have to look in a big unabridged dictionary, because a little dictionary may not give you this definition. But the second one is, it's an old English expression which means upward and onward to greater glory. Now, what could be better than that? So that's what I decided to write. Now, the funny thing is, I would get so much mail from fans saying, how come you use a word that means the packing stuff that makes things? And I'd have to write a letter and say, get a bigger dictionary and put the same. See what I mean? A simple question, and I've been talking for a half hour. I'm sorry.
I think the new dictionary should probably just, the third definition should be what Stan Lee says. That should be in the dictionary. I think that'd be awesome.